The most perfect murder in the world isn't about how many innocent lives the killer takes, but about making the victims kill each other. A mysterious couple, using fake identities, lures 10 murderers who have escaped legal punishment onto an isolated island cut off from the outside world. Once night falls, one person dies under mysterious circumstances. Each of them hides unspeakable crimes in their past, and just when the last survivor feels lucky to have escaped death, they realize the truth behind this deadly game. There's no need for the killer to act personally. With clever psychological manipulation, the spreading fear alone is enough to drive all 10 people to their doom one by one. Today, let me take you onto this desolate island. There's no tribal-style detective showing up, no last-minute redemption, and not a single soul who makes it out alive. The only thing that stays with you is a nursery rhyme that echoes endlessly in your ears. All 10 strangers who have never met before receive mysterious invitations at the same time. The invitation is signed by an elderly couple named Owen, who invite them to their mansion as guests. The offers are extremely generous. High-paying jobs for the unemployed, financial support for the poor, and a vacation getaway for retirees. In short, the Owens seem to fulfill everyone's emotional needs. So the 10 strangers set out from different places, embarking together on this unknown journey toward death. However, the moment they arrive on the island, the boatman pulls a fast one on them. He tosses their luggage onto the ground and coldly explains that the Owens only paid for transportation. Handling luggage isn't included. Then he turns and leaves. But as he looks back at the group one last time, his expression turns strangely eerie, as if silently mocking these people who are about to walk into a trap. And it doesn't end there. They assume their hosts, the Owens, have already been waiting for them in the mansion. But the only ones who greet them are a married couple of caretakers recently hired by the Owens. Even more surprising, the caretakers have never actually met their employers. They only learned through an agency that 8 guests would be arriving soon. Their job is simply to make sure every guest feels at home. Each person is assigned a room that appears simple on the outside, but is luxurious within. However, one shared detail leaves everyone confused. On the wall of every room hangs a nursery rhyme. 10 little soldiers went out to dine. One choked, and then there were 9. Thankfully, the lavish dinner helps calm everyone's unease. They begin enjoying the meal and even introduce themselves, sharing their professions and backgrounds. But just as they are about to have dessert, a harsh broadcast suddenly echoes through the room. And that's not even the strangest part. What comes through the speaker chills everyone to the bone. A cold, mechanical voice calls out each of their names one by one, listing the crimes they've long kept hidden. A doctor who caused a death during a drunken operation, a police officer who framed an innocent man, a nun who abused her maid to death, and so on. The broadcast shatters the illusion of a pleasant dinner. Everyone rushes toward the source of the sound in the basement. But when they open the door, there's no one there, only a tape recorder still playing. Just as confusion spreads, the caretaker rushes out carrying his unconscious wife. Clearly, the broadcast has caused her to faint. Amid the chaos, a young playboy suddenly snaps, grabbing a detective and pinning him against the wall, demanding to know if he's behind all this. During dinner introductions, only the detective's name didn't match the one mentioned in the broadcast, making him highly suspicious. The detective calmly explains that due to his line of work, he's used to using fake names around strangers. The others remain doubtful. Meanwhile, the doctor examines the caretaker's wife and confirms she simply fainted from shock. Suspicion shifts toward the caretaker couple. Since they arrived at the mansion before everyone else, they would have had plenty of time to set up the tape recorder in the basement. But the caretaker looks completely confused by the accusations. He admits the recorder was placed by him, but says it was all arranged in advance by the homeowners. Moreover, the broadcast also accused his wife of killing their former employer for inheritance money, something he insists is completely false, calling it nothing more than malicious slander. Others begin defending themselves as well, each insisting on their innocence. At this moment, the playboy steps forward and admits that he really did kill someone. One night, while driving home alone, 2 children suddenly ran into the road. Unable to avoid them, he hit and killed them both instantly. There is no remorse in his tone, only contempt. In his mind, it wasn't his fault, but the fault of irresponsible parents. Who lets their kids run around on the road at midnight? But as soon as he finishes speaking, his face turns pale. He clutches his throat, his eyes bulging. Blood begins pouring from his mouth, and within seconds, he stops breathing. The sudden death makes everyone realize they need to leave this place immediately. In the chaos, they quickly agree to leave the island by boat the next morning. As night falls, everyone returns to their rooms filled with fear and unease. Half asleep, the caretaker's wife is startled awake by strange noises outside the door. At the same time, the doctor lies awake, haunted by memories of a patient who died from a drug overdose years ago. He thought he had escaped legal punishment, but now, fate has caught up with him. The next morning, a frantic knocking wakes everyone up. Outside stands the pale-faced caretaker. His wife has died in her sleep, with no signs of anyone entering or leaving the room. Just as everyone is about to treat her death as an accident, the school teacher Brent notices something unsettling. She realizes that 2 of the little soldier figurines on the dining table have disappeared. She asks if anyone touched them, but is met with silence. Then she points out the nursery rhyme hanging in each room. 10 little soldiers went out to dine. 1 choked, and then there were 9. 9 little soldiers stayed up late. 1 overslept, and then there were 8. Doesn't that perfectly match how the playboy and the caretaker's wife died? 1 choked during dinner, and the other died in her sleep. Even more disturbing, the police found cyanide in the playboy's mouth, and the caretaker's wife had taken sedatives before bed. All signs seem to point to the doctor as the killer, since he's the only one carrying medical supplies that could contain poison. But the doctor has his own explanation. He says he brought the medical kit to treat Mr. Owen. That's the reason he was invited to the island. However, no one believes him. The detective proposes a solution: search the doctor's medical kit and everyone else's belongings as well. After a thorough search, nothing suspicious is found, just ordinary medication. While this brings some relief, it also deepens the fear. If the killer isn't among them, then someone must be hiding somewhere in the mansion, or perhaps the mysterious Owens themselves are orchestrating everything. But why would they do this? Fear pushes everyone to pack their bags faster. As soon as the boat arrives, they'll leave this cursed place. However, the mercenary argues that they shouldn't leave without understanding what's going on. He suggests teaming up with the detective to search every room thoroughly. Most people are outside at the moment, giving them the perfect chance to investigate. Unlike the others, the general sits alone by the shore, lost in memories of the past. Years ago, while commanding troops on the front line, he discovered a love letter from his wife in his aide's pocket. Enraged by the betrayal, he shot the aide on the spot. His wife later took her own life out of shame. Brent tries to urge the general to return and pack, but he politely asks her to leave him alone. After she walks away, a thick fog begins to roll in from the shore. Through the mist, a faint figure seems to approach him, strangely familiar, both terrifying and oddly comforting. At the same time, the 3 searching the mansion hear a strange noise coming from the basement. The mercenary immediately becomes alert. Before opening the door, he pulls out a handgun from behind his back. This shocks the others. Who brings a gun on vacation? But there's no time to question it. The mercenary pushes the door open. Inside, there's no killer, just the caretaker, standing helplessly with a folding bed. He nervously explains that his wife's body is still in their room, and it feels too unsettling to sleep there, so he's moving to another room. The doctor questions him. Why bother when they'll leave as soon as the boat arrives? But the caretaker insists he isn't leaving. He was hired for a job, and until he's dismissed, he's going nowhere. He also has nowhere else to go. His sense of duty is almost absurd. The 3 ignore him and return to the hallway, quietly discussing who the real killer might be. Meanwhile, time keeps passing, but the boat that was supposed to pick them up never arrives. Instead, the old nun notices a flock of seagulls circling overhead. When she goes to check, she discovers the general is dead, lying beside a blood-stained wooden stick. The killer is no longer relying on poison. Brent rushes back to the dining room, and sure enough, another figurine is gone. The rhyme continues. 8 little soldiers traveled to Devon. 1 stayed behind, and then there were 7. It seems to match the general's death. As the storm howls outside, the mansion falls into an eerie silence. The boat never comes, yet people keep dying one after another. Even more terrifying, no matter how thoroughly they search, there's no sign of the Owens, which means more deaths are coming. But who is the killer? At this point, the judge notices something strange. The name Owen, when rearranged, forms the word unknown. Having presided over countless bizarre cases, he concludes that the Owens don't exist at all. It's obvious. Someone has lured them all to this island, and that person is hiding among them. Fear of the unknown spreads, and suspicion turns them against each other. Some demand the mercenary hand over his gun, others accuse the caretaker, but the arguments lead nowhere. One by one, they return to their rooms, anxious and restless, hoping a boat will arrive tomorrow. But this night is destined to be anything but peaceful. The next morning, the doctor rings a gong downstairs, its harsh sound echoing through the mansion. This isn't a wake-up call. Someone else has died. Following the doctor, everyone heads to the basement, where they find the caretaker's mutilated body.
7 little soldiers chopping up sticks. 1 chopped himself in half, and then there were 6. It is the poet. But he's fucked, Mr. Unknown Owen, because 6 little soldier boys played with a hive. A bumblebee stung 1, and then there were 5, and there is no hive here, and there are no bees. So what are you gonna do now, Mr. Unknown Owen? You're fucked! You're fucked!
The doctor admits Brent was right, and he's on the verge of breaking down under the pressure. Who would have thought a luxurious vacation would turn into a one-way trip to death? No boats, no communication. Trapped on this isolated island, all they can do is wait. Wait for the next line of the nursery rhyme to come true. But there are no bees on the island. Could that break the curse of the rhyme? That fragile hope becomes their last lifeline. The doctor secretly approaches the judge, proposing an alliance. In this deadly game, the experienced judge is the only one who has remained calm. The judge agrees on the surface. After all, who doesn't want to survive? But there's something hidden in his deep, unreadable gaze. That night, a violent storm overloads the power system, plunging the entire mansion into darkness. Brent volunteers to find candles, but as she passes through the dining room, she notices something chilling. Another little soldier figurine is gone. She immediately rang the gong. No need to ask, someone had died again. Sure enough, the old nun had been stabbed through the neck with a sharp blade, and the brand name on it read, B. Fear spread among the survivors like a virus. Their sense of reason slowly crumbled, and accusations and suspicion once again became the only way they knew how to respond. Everyone began retracing each other's movements. Even a brief absence of a few minutes was enough to provide a window for murder. These baseless accusations only made the atmosphere more tense, without bringing them any closer to the truth. To make matters worse, after the nun's death, the mercenary returned to his room, only to discover that the gun in his drawer was gone. This meant not only had they failed to find the killer, but the killer was now armed. At this point, the judge proposed a final solution, a full search of everyone's belongings and every corner of every room. They could both look for evidence to identify the killer and try to find the missing gun. But to their despair, no matter how hard they searched, the gun seemed to have vanished into thin air. Under this suffocating, eerie pressure, people began to break down. Brent became the first to completely lose her mental composure. When she went back alone to use the bathroom, she felt as if a cold gaze was watching her from behind. Yet every time she turned around, there was nothing but an empty hallway staring back at her. The moment she bent down to wash her face, a pale hand suddenly reached out from the sink and grabbed her throat. As she struggled on the edge of suffocation, Brent's consciousness began to blur. Yes, she too had committed an unforgivable crime. Whether through negligence or deliberate indifference, she had allowed a young boy to sink forever into the lake. But when Brent opened her eyes again, she realized it was the doctor who had revived her with medication, while the detective tried to calm her nerves. They rushed around, bringing water, handing her medicine, and gradually the tension eased. Just as everyone thought they were temporarily safe, the doctor raised a critical question no one had considered. Where was the judge? They quickly found him in his room, but now there was a bullet hole in his forehead. The nursery rhyme had come true again. 5 little soldiers went in for law, 1 got into chancery, and then there were 4. Even the calmest and most rational among them had fallen, plunging the remaining 4 into complete panic. Since they couldn't find the hidden killer, they turned back to suspecting one another. After all, during the time the judge was killed, each of them had been alone at some point. But as they stared at the dwindling number of little soldier figurines on the table, they realized that these baseless accusations were meaningless. If death was inevitable, why not indulge themselves one last time? Driven by despair, they turned the recording of their accusations up to full volume. With that eerie background playing, they began a twisted, final celebration. Alcohol quickly numbed their nerves and lowered their guard. One by one, they began confessing the crimes they had long kept hidden. The mercenary admitted first. During a mission, he had slaughtered an entire tribe of 21 people. The detective confessed that he harbored deep prejudice against bisexual individuals, and years ago, he had beaten one to death. Amid this almost confessional atmosphere, the doctor leaned toward the detective and quietly suggested something, that Brent and the mercenary seemed unusually close. He suspected the two of them might actually be the mysterious Owens, orchestrating everything from behind the scenes. The two agreed not to expose them immediately, deciding to wait until everyone returned to their rooms. Late that night, the detective sat alone on his bed, patiently waiting for any clue. Sure enough, he heard faint footsteps in the hallway. Opening the door quietly, he was surprised to see the doctor sneaking downstairs. The detective immediately found the mercenary and told him the doctor was likely the real killer. But when the two of them chased after him, they found no one. When they returned at dawn, they discovered only 3 figurines left on the table. The missing gun had mysteriously reappeared on the bed. Even more puzzling, they hadn't found the doctor's body, something that didn't match the nursery rhyme. Brent became convinced that the doctor was the killer. She asked them to think back to the party. Who suggested they drink? Who played the recording? All signs pointed to the doctor. It had to be a carefully planned scheme. He got everyone drunk and off guard, giving himself time to leave the mansion and kill them one by one. Brent insisted they had to find the doctor during the day. It was their only hope of surviving long enough to escape the island. Her reasoning convinced both the mercenary and the detective. They split up. The detective stayed behind in the mansion to continue investigating, while Brent and the mercenary searched the shoreline. But when the agreed meeting time passed, the detective never returned. Sensing something was wrong, the mercenary decided to go back and check, telling Brent to stay where she was. Time passed, and the mercenary didn't come back either. Brent's unease grew stronger and stronger until she could no longer stand it. She ran back toward the mansion, pushing open the heavy front doors. The sight before her made her blood run cold. The mercenary stood in the center of the hall, breathing heavily. At his feet lay the detective's body, covered with a thick bear rug. The rhyme had come true again. A bear hugged one, and then there were two. The two of them no longer dared to stay in the mansion and immediately ran toward the shore. At that moment, Brent spotted someone lying in the distance. It was the doctor's body, washed ashore by the tide. The mercenary didn't want to bother with it, only wanting to find a place with a clear view to wait for rescue. But Brent insisted they couldn't leave the body to be desecrated by seabirds, begging him to help bury it. Just as the mercenary bent down to lift the body, Brent suddenly made her move. She snatched the gun from his waist. At that moment, it became obvious who the killer was. Now the only people left alive were the mercenary and her. Without hesitation, Brent pulled the trigger, emptying the gun into his chest. After killing him, she seemed to shed all her burdens. A sense of release washed over her. The sudden collapse of her mental strain caused her to fall onto the warm sand. Half conscious, she began recalling the secret she had buried deep in her heart. The boy she kept seeing in the mirror had once been her favorite student. Everything changed after she fell in love with his uncle, a wealthy and handsome man. To help her lover secure the family inheritance, Brent carefully devised a plan. She tricked the boy into going swimming, then pretended she was too weak to save him. At the funeral, she cried more than anyone, appearing more devastated than anyone else. No one suspected the devoted teacher, but in the end, the uncle saw through her true nature and cut ties with her without hesitation. Everyone on this island had committed unforgivable crimes, and all of them had died here. So she, too, chose to accept judgment. But just as Brent prepared to hang herself, the door suddenly opened.
One little soldier boy left all alone. He went and hanged himself. And then there were none.
A familiar yet impossible figure walked in. It was the judge, who was supposed to be dead. The truth was, the judge was the mysterious mastermind. He had impersonated the Owens and lured everyone to the island. As for how he came back from the dead, it was all thanks to the doctor. Remember when the doctor approached him about forming an alliance? The judge's condition was to fake his death to deceive the killer. The doctor used raw meat and blood from the kitchen to stage the scene, and no one questioned his medical conclusion. No one even bothered to double-check. They simply assumed the judge was dead. As for the night when the detective saw the doctor sneaking out, it was because they had arranged to meet by the shore. But the judge pushed the doctor off a cliff.
Why are you doing this?
Because justice comes to all.
The judge's reasoning was simple. He had spent his entire life as a judge, constantly facing criminals who escaped justice. Over the years, he watched countless killers walk free due to lack of evidence, legal loopholes, or technicalities. That sense of helplessness consumed him, leading him to question, if the law cannot deliver justice, then who will? He explained in detail how he designed each death to match the rhyme, and how he removed one figurine after each killing. He had created a perfect trial on this isolated island, forcing each person to pay for their crimes. And now, only Brent remained. No, one more person remained, himself. The judge kicked the chair out from under Brent. Then he went to the dining room. After drinking a glass of wine, he calmly picked up the gun and pointed it at himself. He knew that as long as someone on the island was still alive, his perfect plan would remain incomplete. So he had to become the final soldier to die. When the authorities eventually discovered 10 bodies on the island and a pair of hosts who never existed, this flawless mystery would become the masterpiece he left behind for the world.